I just looked away and I saw Xandor's video feed now for a second. So I like this is the best I could muster up, guys. So there we go. Happy Halloween, I guess. Also, Ben, like I am awaiting your primal gurgle sounds. Again, to start this.
Is that like a is that like a hotly requested?
The fans.
People come here. People come here for gurgling. JavaScript opinions. Everyone has one. Gurgling, JavaScript Breakpoint exclusive.
There you go. By popular demand, we have Ben's primal noises. All right. All right. Let's get into it. There's a lot to cover, so let's not waste any time. Let us chat about this chap. Mr. Ken C. Dodds. And he very recently wrote an article titled "Why I Won't Use Next.js." Have any of you guys read it?
Yeah, I read it. I skim read it.
Yes, same here. But I, for once, going into I actually read the article purely just because, I was like, yeah, obviously he's going to punt remix and so forth, and it is a bit of a clickbaity title. But I actually found it pretty insightful, surprisingly. I'm curious what the rest of you guys think.
Okay, so
Xander, can you even read with your mask?
Barely. Yeah. These are very much a novelty item.
Yeah. So my main takeaway from it is that I do agree with his sentiment. The main takeaway is that Next.js is too tightly coupled with the Vercel platform. And it's becoming increasingly coupled, which is a concern that I share as well. I just don't necessarily think that something like Remix is maybe all that much different.
So that's the point that I think is really good from the article. The idea that React would do much better with an open governance model, and the idea that we basically just have two robber barons right now having a little spat over what is important and what gets built, and apparently not really communicating very well with each other is scary. But at the same time, no one else in the world is investing as money into React as Meta and Vercel are, right? So we wouldn't have the stuff we have, and we wouldn't have the stability we have and reach we have if it weren't for Vercel and Meta's investment. But just a little bit more community engagement would be great. And I think they're looking at it, and Kent mentions in the article as well, it looks like they're upping the DevRel game a little bit. And I'm really excited to see what that brings. And I feel like we need a React 39 like we have a TC 39 almost at some point.
Well, no, remember when Node and NPM were not really governed the way they are now. There was also a bit of a... Honestly, in some ways, it's surprising it's taken that long and that it's gone this well for this long. I remember there was a slight bit of community backlash around React's license, and there was a patent exclusion, and there was a lot of concern around that. But then Facebook changed their tune, and it all worked out all right.
Yeah, I personally, I don't know if you guys are familiar with OpenNext. I like it's mentioned in the article quite a bit as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's effectively, like it is to Next, I guess, what you can't really say Chromium, but it's kind of similar, like the Chromium thing, and I kind of see that, and 100%, I agree that. I think one of my key things is that like the JavaScript ecosystem and the scale of JavaScript in 2023 is so large and complex that I don't really know how well a team of people who just do open source work as a common good would be able to drive something as big as React, compared to the resources and pockets and manpower that you have behind companies like, Facebook and Vercel and so forth. And
Well,
like,
even you would like to have a chat.
but also, no, sure, 100%. But there's a reason why. I need to be very careful what I say now, but okay, I'll just come out and say it, but it's my personal take. I stand to be corrected. It's just my subjective take, is that I find Vue to be very reactive, ironically enough, in terms of when hooks came out, they kind of did their own version, and with kind of server components, they're probably going to do their own version now. And, with a lot of the Svelte stuff, there's also like kind of a bit of talk about Vue doing something similar. So
And
sure,
they're able to do the same thing that the bigger teams did. And like, what's been amazing about Vue is like how quickly their releases come after these new ideas come onto the
sure,
scene,
but the point I'm making
Amazing.
is, to really, we wouldn't have had something like hooks because of all the thought like put into something like that, all the prototyping and so forth. So like it's almost like the React team kind of pushed this idea that really came up with something like kind of that wasn't in the paradigm. And I think like that type of work, like I don't see how a purely open driven project can do that type of thing. Like, more often than not, like it's just a struggle to get consensus.
I
And
don't know if
yes,
I agree with you on that, Skull.
is
Like,
it? Okay.
abstractions are largely designed by individuals and refined by groups.
Yeah. Fair
right?
enough. Yeah.
So,
I guess you could say that.
like, if you drill down to the core, the original idea is
Did Ben freeze?
Did he freeze, or is he just taking a very long time to think?
Yep.
so
No, you're back.
maybe or like a reactivity model or the VDOM, all those things were probably at their core an individual's idea originally, and then executed well by a team.
Fair enough. So
Great
yes,
individual who can own both design and execution, then you can get a lot more done. look at GNU, right? Look at Linux. Linux has many contributors, but like the top 5th percentile owns like 80% of the contribution.
And that's Microsoft.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I guess that's
And then
true.
it's Red Hat, IBM.
So you did cut out there. You did cut out there for a significant amount of time. But yeah, I see where you're going, and yeah, I guess that is a valid point. Now I can see that happening, but I think the reality is that is not what's happening at the moment. Like you.
So
it is mostly these big companies, even like Remix, like is kind of behind it. We have Shopify, so yeah.
So the thing is, design in itself, conceptualization of a design doesn't take that much, like team effort or even like that much effort initially. Like it takes a lot of oomph around the brain to make it work, and it's really hard. But the hardest part of design is executing on the concept. And generally, you need a lot of time and a lot of trial and error to execute. And time and trial and error in at least the Western world need capital.
Incidentally, it's that part of the process that, technically speaking, is what innovation is talking about. Innovation isn't about coming up with the idea. Innovation is taking the idea and like making it work where the rubber hits the road, right? That's actually innovation. So when someone says they're an innovator, if they actually know what they're talking about, that's what they mean, right? They're the person, they're not an ideas person. They're someone who like can help an ideas person like turn an idea into a business or a product or whatever. So actually Edison was an innovator and Tesla wasn't.
How closely related is that to an influencer? And like how many like followers difference?
Yeah.
Asking for a friend. But like there's also like an analogy in there about like, you know, if you ask the developers what they want, they tell you they want a faster jQuery. So there we go.
Yeah.
But so I think
I still like that. It's like this looks great, but just
yeah, that was just the
Did you see what's the chat on ZA Tech today where people are like, Jake, I think they're being ironic, but they're saying like jQuery was peak web dev, and someone's like, it's only was if you stopped using it. I thought was
yeah.
I
never.
They have one item left on their version 4 roadmap now, or 5, or like 15 or 14 or something. Probably a smaller number than you were thinking, but then once you hear that, a bigger number than you were thinking, then I can't remember what the version.
jQuery is cool, and you can learn a lot of things by reading its source code. I cut my teeth on making like jQuery plugins.
Same here.
Yeah.
I think like it's also like I don't want to digress too much, but it's also worth noting that when people like joke, like make fun at jQuery's expense and so forth, it's also because jQuery was so good that it's actually still relevant. You know,
does anybody remember the DOM from when jQuery made?
Yes,
you know,
and you know, like
what a breath of fresh air to use jQuery.
Yeah, the
like
fact that people
I could select things and I could make Ajax calls. That's all I wanted. And then promises came in. Then like life became happy.
So the thing, jQuery is a phenomenal solution. Like it's amazing. It's just like we don't really have the problem.
Are you breaking up there?
Yeah,
your mic
sound's breaking up a bit. Your video is coming through really nicely, but.
And now for a word from our sponsor, Crisp.ai. Get in touch. Crisp.ai.
All right, but let's move on to the next thing. This boy.
Yep.
So React Query 5 has been released.
Tanstack Query version 5.
Oh, excuse me, Tanstack Query. Yeah. Everyone's still talking.
That's not their logo anymore. By the way, it's like a palm tree now. I think.
I like the flower one.
Yeah, I think they changed the logo.
Okay, it'll always be React Query in my heart. It's like how people refuse to like call X anything but Twitter. It's kind of like the same. Like people just call it React Query still.
Honestly, if you called something X, and unless there was a lot of context, you'd honestly be like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, fair enough. Like I think before we started this call, Ben mentioned about him putting someone on his X blocked list, and I thought for a second he meant like no. You said something along the lines of like he's in your X blocked list, and I thought for a second you meant like he was blocked and he isn't blocked anymore.
I thought it was more like your block list is just called an X list.
I just think Musk is like proving just how smooth-brained we all are.
Yeah, 100%. Yes. So
I can't handle the single character name. It's too hard.
I tend to oscillate between React Query is really great, and yeah, I don't really like it. I'm kind of on the down curve now again, where I'm like, yeah, I actually don't like it anymore. But then I usually get like in a couple of months, I'm like, hey, it's actually really cool. So I tend to oscillate a bit. Where do you guys fall? I think you guys really like. Oh, sorry, I stand corrected. You guys really like Tanstack Query.
Yeah. So I like React Query. I think the version 5 is bringing some interesting things. Like, for example, now they've got like a use suspense query where they've got a much better story around using the React suspense API, where you, like, even from a type perspective, you don't have to worry about the error states or the loading states. Like, you just kind of
we
worry
invested
about
in that a little bit too soon, probably.
maybe a little bit too soon. So Ike Dodo, who's one of the maintainers, he's updated his practical React Query series with like
he's amazing.
Notes about version 5. They also talked a little bit. I don't think that was super recently. But
Use referral code. Give South African monies too.
He also, by the way, spoke about.
You hear that, Dodo?
He also spoke about like React Query together with like React routers, kind of like loaders model, and how they actually work really, really, really well together. And how React Query is still relevant in the age of server components, because with like server actions, which is kind of like similar to, I guess, remixes, loaders, and that kind of thing. And we'll talk about server actions in a bit. You might be wondering, do I still need React Query? And it's like, well, what if you want your app to work offline? What if you want caching? What if you want prefetching? What if you want any of these kinds of things, and you still need it? And on top of that, there was an interesting Twitter thread about
polling,
about using React Query for things other than network requests. So some people used it for like the async storage APIs, like on Android, or permission systems, or all sorts of other things.
I've used it with IndexedDB.
Yeah. So you can use it for any number of async things with like an API that you're familiar with by wrapping it up that way.
But it's also very, I guess no. Okay, so I wanted to say, like, I think the docs are very clear. You shouldn't use it for like as a place to store local state. But I guess theoretically that isn't local state. So
Well, yeah. So there's a difference, right? What you really want to use it for is you want to use it for the client part of your server state. Right? The part of the server state that your client cares about. That's really what it's good at for helping you synchronize that. So if you have local state, I think what they mean is state that only matters locally.
Yes.
Right, not state that just happens to be on the client, because obviously you need to have some of the state go to the client in order for the user to be able to interact with it at all.
Yeah. I also think a lot of that was just like in response to people thinking that this now completely replaces something like Redux or so forth. And it does, but it replaces a specific aspect.
Or a lot of applications, yes.
Well, put it this way: it replaces Redux if you were using Redux wrong, which is to say, Redux is really not great at being a state synchronization library, like a client-server state synchronization library. That's not its point. That's why Redux came out with Redux Toolkit Query, which was chiefly inspired by React Query, right? So
let's talk about the one thing RTK does right that React Query doesn't, is it gives you an answer for how to make a query key factory. Rather than just telling you to figure it out yourself, yo. And look, I'm an old man. I've been in this space for many years, and I have seen many. I've been with React Query from infancy. I've been with React from its infancy. I've seen a lot of things, man. Chopper flying by, looking into the distance, Vietnam flashback. I've seen a lot of things, And I've only seen like 1 or 2 projects where people actually formalize how query keys work in React Query, with some like system they do. And those projects were great to work on. The others where query keys were just like whatever the dev felt like at that time. I hated them. It's pain. It's pure
Yeah,
pain.
it's React Query. Like what the road to spaghetti is paved in React Query.
Yeah. So one
No,
of
it's
the
just in not reading the docs before you use the thing, because they like make it pretty clear
No,
you should
sure.
have an answer for this.
But
So one of the things that
if your solution is people need to read, I have very, very
Yeah.
bad news for you. Yeah.
so that's
Yeah,
one of the
that's
things
what I'm
Redux Toolkit
saying.
Query
I
does
agree.
well. They just kind of make the defaults the happy path. Pretty much that practical React Query series, Redux Toolkit Query was like, cool, just bake that in. We'll allow you to sidestep all of the things we're doing if you need to. Having said that, to be fair, it's very easy to say this is a better design in hindsight, right? Like React Query obviously broke a lot of new ground, and you can't just break everyone that is using it differently. So there's something about responsible maintainership, and at that point, the best you can do is to say these are best practices or patterns or whatever else.
Yeah.
Which,
I think
funny
there
enough,
should be a special Semver version. Like, you know how it's major, minor, bug? There should be like a special tag you can use, call it Angular 2, when you do like a complete rewrite of the framework. Then, like,
Well,
that
if
version
only
is just
literally
Angular 2.
changing the name from React
do what
Query to
Redux did.
Tanstack Query gave you an opportunity.
You could do what
Yeah,
Redux
this
did.
is not relevant to this conversation. Like their API consistency is really good. The big change in this one in 5 is they got rid of overloads because they bow to TypeScript, and TypeScript's errors on overloads are awful. And
I hate
there's
overloads.
a hot debate, on whether overloads are actually a good design decision or not. And I don't know how I feel about it. I like when they work, they're great, but when they don't work, it's just like gouge your eyes on situations.
I think they can work. So I think overloads you can use for many different things. Like you can use overloads for when your function is kind of like you dried your code up too early, and then later on it turns out that now you've got a lot of logic in this one code function that should have done 2 different things, and you end up using an overload to make that work. That's shit. However, if you want to provide some conveniences around, you can either put in a string or an object that like has an ID key, and you know what I mean, like those kinds of overloads
Yeah.
where it's just really like ergonomics. Yeah, there it makes a lot of sense. I think that's
So
nice.
the argument since like the old days has always been different method.
Yeah,
Different
just give it a
method for
different,
utility.
just give it a different
Yeah.
thing. But it was nice that like in jQuery, for example, you could give it a DOM element, you could give it a this, or you could give it another jQuery object, and it would just give you the same thing out.
Oh yeah, I remember
Yeah, that kind of stuff,
Did
right?
you did
That's
you
just
also have
convenient.
that like that one JavaScript file in your like home directory or whatever that was like your jQuery plugin template that you use?
Yeah.
Before GitHub was a thing, you had this like directory with like jQuery plugin templates, skeletons, and it was a Sublime Text or Emacs expansion.
Yeah, it was a snippet.
Yeah,
Poor man's
slinging some
snippets.
hot jQuery in 2008.
That's actually like poor man's NPM, basically.
Oh,
You have one big file and
remember,
just
remember
copy and paste
Bauer?
into it.
Yep.
Remember,
I never got the point of
Bauer.
Bauer. I never
Was
understood it.
Bauer
I'm like,
the one with the bird? No,
Yeah.
Blue, was
Yeah.
it? No, which one? Bauer was
No,
the
Bauer
one
was
with
the
the
one
bird,
with
right?
the bird.
Yeah.
The reason for
I-
Bauer is
I never used it. I was just like, but everything's already on npm, and I can do the same thing with npm. I never got the point of Bauer. I'm like, what's the point of this?
Because Bauer
like-
technically, because there were purists who went like, web stuff shouldn't go on npm, like front end.
But it was
stuff
still on
shouldn't go
npm under the hood. I don't get it.
So the main thing is like with Bower is, like, so I think people were still, that's before CommonJS and like Browserify and those things really picked all up. So people were still kind of considering like Require and kind of like Node as a completely like back-end thing. And then Bower was more suited for going like literally your script and then you pull it in from there in your HTML. Instead of kind of like
modules.
yes,
I think
yes,
I gravitated towards using a build step like really,
yes,
really
exactly.
heavily.
And this was also like in the era where people were still all about like the what's it AMD and what's it Require JS
System
and all that
JS.
stuff. Yes.
Oh,
yes.
So System JS.
remember CoffeeScript?
Yeah.
CoffeeScript?
Yeah.
So do you know what System JS was funny because that was at the time the most standards based approach because it tried to like implement in a user land kind of way what Harmony said about the module system. So ES4 that never was like that was
Did
their
you guys
design basically.
So obviously, Xander, you are not in Cape Town. Ben, did you attend the talk? So Guy Bedford was here one time in Cape Town, and he actually did a talk on System.js a couple of years ago.
That was many years ago.
Yes. But I just thought about that.
That was like 4JS times.
Yes, but like that's the last time I thought about System.js. But so like in short, basically, like I think people were still holding out that the way module resolution is going to work in the browser is going to be very different from how it works in Node, and they actually ended up building it, and they realized it was a dumpster fire, and they were like, oh, okay, cool, let's just use the Node one, pull it in through Browserify. And so obviously then
Python got involved, and now we have ES modules, and now I have to put like .js at the end of my imports in the latest version of Node.
I like that.
And I get why, but like I don't want to see .js in my TypeScript file.
Dude, it's a dirty word. But yeah, like we should probably move on.
We still got a bunch of big releases.
Yes.
I don't know why they all loaded those up this like right at the end of this month actually. So Remix finally made it
Christmas.
too. Woo! Now,
yes, this little boy.
This upgrade for me was very painless because they have that future flag system. So all I did was take those out of my Remix conf and went on with my day.
And shame. So also like the team behind Remix got so much like flack for kind of like how API breaking React Router was. And a lot of people were scared that's gonna happen with Remix 2 as well. But actually, turns out they actually have a very sensible approach to how they do it with the flagging and so forth. I don't know if you've looked into it at all.
These future flag stuff. I really like.
I really like their approach. Yeah.
Would love to see that everywhere. Not like shipping canary versions of sub-dependencies and calling it stable.
Well, it is stable. No. It's the canary. So the thing when the React feature is in canary, the feature is stable, right? But the schlep is you have to now pin the version of React that you're using, and you have to be a lot more intentional about that upgrade, right? Like, and they do that because there's like sometimes certain interactions with other features. That's the reason why it's not in the stable release yet.
Are you actually saying that we should actually care about semantic versioning? What madness is this?
I know.
Huh? That we actually... Are you telling me we should actually care about...
the T3 guys, or T3 team, sorry, bleed responsibly.
Is this called bleed responsibly?
Yeah, if you want to be on the bleeding edge, bleed responsibly.
Yeah, if you're on the bleeding edge, bleed responsibly.
So that's cool.
Some highlights are of this whole like remix thing. They now have flat routing. They have much better support for like various CSS stuff, like using using Tailwind with Remix now is like a thing you can do. It's not that hard because they have post CSS support, vanilla extract support, global CSS modules. They now have hot module reloading support. They've got experimental support for Remix as a Vite plugin, which brings React Fast Refresh as well. They have experimental support for the View Transitions API. They're actually doing like a lot of cool stuff. It seems like Shopify is not letting it wither, which is great.
Yes. Yeah. That was my fear was, and I think like diversity in terms of the ecosystem is always a good thing. And I think my fear was that Shopify would quote unquote buy Remix and just cannibalize it into their own stuff that they're building. That kind of like just strip out all the cool stuff and like just use it internally. Or at the very least, then ship like Shopify framework or whatever. So that's really cool.
Hydrogen, right? That's Shopify's framework.
Well,
yes.
Is that still maintained now that they bought Remix? I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought
like
they
that
bought
was
Remix to like replace it.
And then React Server Components is going to be a Remix v3 thing.
Really? Weren't they quite bullish in terms of they're not going to do? They're kind of pushing against.
I don't know where that rumor came from.
Is
I
it
don't
not?
know where that rumor came from.
Is it? Okay.
No.
I don't know. I'm speaking from hearsay. Yeah.
They weren't super anti, but I think this was back when the use case for server components wasn't as well communicated as it is now. And part of the reason that communication improved is because Kent was like, I don't get that point. Like, right?
Yes.
You get all of everything you said so far, Remix does today. I don't see the point of this. And part of that was, Joe and Dan, like, having like discussions with them. So it is clearer now.
Yeah. So also I have to say, like, my knowledge of that is purely just because people have used it as an argument for why server components are bad. They're like, oh, okay, but the Remix team said it sucks. So like that is the context that I have behind it. I don't have a primary source. Okay, so that's interesting. But it's if it was the case, it's inevitable. I don't see the value of, even if you disagree with it, I don't see the value in terms of kicking against the standardization. But anyway, but then we have this. Oh no, where's that? It's not showing. Okay, but I had the Vite logo in here. Let's chat about that. This is the first time I'm hearing about it. Let me just do a poor man's Vite logo. So apparently there's some Vite related stuff. Do you want to tell us about that, Sandor?
Yeah, so it's still like experimental, but basically Remix is going to become a Vite plugin because they figured out that compilers are hard. I'm joking. They knew that from the beginning, but in order to do what they wanted to do, they had to have a compiler, and that was back when Vite didn't exist yet. On top of that, part of the dev experience, you needed hot data reloading in addition to like hot module reloading. That
and it's a solved problem.
Well, now since recently, it's a solved problem. So they're deciding to get off the compiler train and becoming a Vite plugin, which is great because it'll give you access to other Vite plugins in your Remix setup, right? You'll be able to chain these things together, and if you really need to, you can access the wider rollup ecosystem as well. And this means that you no longer have a hard dependency on ESBuild, like you can use SWC if you want. And whatever else Vite ends up adding support for later on. Or you could use Babel if you wanted to, right?
right. That one.
which we might just touch on. Like, is that foreshadowing? Anyway, we might touch on that later. So I think it's a cool move. It's certainly. They're kind of like, we're no relate to the party. We're here now, so.
Yeah, I think it's a good decision. Like, it's yeah, like I think it's a good move, and like also it's probably also worth mentioning. We don't have a slide about it in here, but it's also mentioning, I guess, slightly related, is ESLint team recently said that they
Oh, yeah.
are going to move away from actually enforcing code style specific stuff, which I think is a good move, and it's very much also kind of like the same approach where it's like there's overlap between what they do and what another tool does. So they are just redirecting their focus to the part that the other tool doesn't do. And I think that's great. I'm definitely a fan of that, and it's kind of the same here as well. I like the fact that they just went with Vite and they can actually focus on solving like more remix specific problems than just building a compiler. So yeah, that's my general take.
Is that one of the rotary telephones I've heard about?
What?
Is that a rotary telephone?
Where? Oh, in the GIF.
It's a terrible joke. I know what Primal is. I'm just joking.
I'll maybe watch the recording of this and I'd be like, Skulk, you idiot. But at this moment I'm like, let's wait all over. Okay. Yeah, I'll leave a comment and say, okay, I finally got it. But yeah. Yes, Analog.
Right. So this is a meta framework for Angular.
Yeah. I'm
That's their
trying to
actual
not
logo?
I wish. I was looking for the logo, and I didn't find a logo, which
So
kind of I think feeds back to my joke that the meta framework for Angular is just Angular. But yeah,
Yeah. So the analog logo is two triangles that kind of look like mountains with like a, I don't know, like a heartbeat kind of wave across. It's like mountain rescue.
a red
right?
a red Nuxt.
That's what it looks to be.
He has a yeah. Okay.
Anyways,
it's also powered by Vite.
Yeah, so it's like Vite, and they now have file-based routing, and basically they're bringing a lot of the, I guess, expectations and conveniences of modern meta frameworks to Angular, which is kind of, that's the crib notes. That's all I know about it. I left Angular behind a long time ago, so I can't comment more deeply.
So I stand to be corrected. It's not like the Nuxt logo at all. The Nuxt logo has the smaller triangle on the right side instead of
you're
the
right.
left
That is
side.
actually, you know what? That is a key difference.
Yeah, okay. I stand corrected. It's not like the Nuxt logo at all.
Over your mistake, Skulk. Are you sorry? Have you apologized enough?
But yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to talk about this without being snarky. But I don't know. I've heard about this Angular Renaissance now for like almost 2 years, where like Angular is finally coming back strong. And
well, the Angular team says that's happening on November the 6th, 2023, specifically.
Oh, so it's been postponed again.
No, no. Okay, so what I'm alluding to is like Angular is like teasing online that like something big's coming, and there's like literally there's a YouTube video called "Special Angular Event" from the Angular channel. And that's it.
Okay.
Is it like a eulogy, maybe?
No. Look,
special Angular event. It's the Angular funeral.
I think there's a lot of interesting stuff like that might be done. I've never liked the DX of Angular. I really haven't. But I think that's a personal taste kind of thing.
No, 100%.
Like, I don't like
agree
object-oriented programming, which Angular is kind of like an implementation of that. I think they did a lot for TypeScript adoption. I think they did a lot for making SPAs accessible, because before Angular was popular, like we had Backbone.js.
And Marionette, which was on top of Backbone.
Yeah. There was Marionette, which I heard about but never ended up using. I ended up using something called Ampersand, which was to Backbone what Lodash was to underscore. It was same thing, except it was modular.
What about that?
Right?
Jeez,
and then from Ampersand, I moved onto React. Anyway,
And then Knockout.js and Riot.js.
Knockout was pretty cool. I really liked
Rock
Knockout.
Connery, like, I still think like the DX of Knockout
Yeah.
at the time was like way up there compared to this.
Yeah, I think Knockout doesn't get enough love, but yeah, no, Knockout was really cool. But yeah, I don't know, like same here. Like I make jokes about Angular, but like it just doesn't solve a problem I have. I can see if you have a team with a very diverse set of skills, and you can't have as a requirement of that have everyone learn JavaScript. To a certain degree, Angular is a really great solution. If you want to abstract JavaScript away enough so that someone who maybe has a background in Java or C# can use it, like can contribute to your product, I do see Angular as a very, very good solution to that. But obviously, that's not the problem that I have.
Yeah. The way I always phrase it is Angular is a front end framework made by back-end developers for back-end developers. And that sounds hilarious if you're a front end developer, but like it's tongue in cheek, but it also I mean that sincerely, right? Like if you have a team of C# or Java developers and you need to create a front end all of a sudden, and they know Java and they know C# and they know those kinds of patterns, then using Angular is a great choice. Like it's going to allow you to hit the ground running far more than React, where even with the improved docs, they're going to go and, assuming there's no experts they have access to, they're going to go and hit their head on all the problems we did, except they're going to do it all at once while they're trying to get something out the door. And we learn all that stuff slowly over time.
And they're going to create components inside their render pipeline. They're going to do those type of things. So no, 100%. In the same way that like if a lot of the tooling that I would use for like quote unquote backend work, a lot of good backend developers would be, get a load of this guy. So yeah, like it's 100% a solid use case. And I think also there is so many actual web apps that are effectively just fancy CRUD apps. Do we really need something like React for those? Do we really need React for an inventory system?
Retool would like to have a word with you.
Yeah, fair enough.
That's Retool's whole reason for being.
But sure, but like also that, like given the choice, if we assume that all abstractions are leaky, I'd probably still go with Angular. If I don't have experience with React. If I'm kind of starting afresh and I need to choose between Angular and this framework that turns React into something like that. But I may be overcompensating here in terms of praising Angular, but I think it's also just I'm so tired of this team A versus the red team versus the green team versus the blue team versus and then there's still people who are like, no, the yellow team sucks. Who are like, why do we even need JavaScript? So I don't know. I'm just so tired of all of this.
It's all about Svelte, man. Like,
oh yeah, the orange team. I forgot about the orange team.
That's where it's at, and I'm just too smooth-brained to understand why.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of smart people in the world out there. I assume that, like, I don't know. Maybe I just give people too much of the benefit of the doubt. But, like, I guess tools that seem sucky to me solve problems for other people. But yes, on that note, what is next? So next is look at this. This animation. Wait for it. Yeah, boy! All right.
Yeah, more React.
Hey, that GIF definitely doesn't use concurrent mode. I can see it stuttering.
Yeah. Okay. Let us talk about React for Get. Ben,
so they haven't forgotten about React for Get, right? There's a lot of...
Yeah, they wrote an article titled that, didn't they?
Yeah. They've actually
This is where you start seeing like all these big JavaScript developers like becoming middle-aged. Is when that's the caliber of jokes that we start getting. Like there was this time where like if someone wrote JavaScript or they were really involved in JavaScript, they were usually quite young. But now it's like, now all the JavaScript devs are turning into dads, and where they make jokes like that, including
To be
myself.
fair, I've been cracking dad jokes
right here. I'm not a dad.
long before I was a dad. That's actually how I knew I would be a great dad. Is the quality of my dad jokes. It's
like, are you're gonna be a dad when Verse is released, Ben? Huh?
Well, yeah, it will be my. Well, I can't say my firstborn because my firstborn's sitting behind me, but my firstborn is a dog, border collie named Scott. The whole world needs to know about him. He's the best.
So let's maybe explain in case some viewers or listeners are not sure what React Forget is. So React Forget is an optimizing compiler which will do a few things, but chiefly it'll remove the need for you to wrap your components with React Memo. Or use Memo inside of your components, or use callback. It'll make all of that stuff redundant. It's just going to do it for you. And on top of that, it's going to add like a level of granularity to the memoization that it does. That is kind of like beyond what you would want to do by hand. I mean, imagine, for example, somewhere in your JSX, imagine there's like one paragraph tag, one open and closing paragraph tag, inside of which there's just like a string value. What it'll do is it'll like memoize just that bit of JSX inside of a use memo, right? You know, and the dependency of that use memo will then be that one string value, because of course JSX is syntactic sugar for React Create Element, which gives you back a piece of the VDOM, right? It's just an object that represents what you want the DOM element to be that comes out of that. And every render cycle, that has a new identity by reference. So it's going to get that granular, way more than you would want to do by hand. I've been a big fan since forever of memoizing all the things. Now, I never did it to that level of granularity. I generally didn't memorize what was rendered. I memoized what was going into what was rendered. Because that was kind of the sweet spot. And it's interesting because...
Watch out, someone's going to throw a Ken C. Dodds article at you.
Yeah. Like when you should use memo. When you like all the rhetoric was don't do that, because and the thing is the motivation that was given for not doing that is because it sounded like premature optimization, and they were talking about like if you do it in the wrong place, it can slow your app down. But like in practice, that like hasn't been a thing I've actually ever run into. In practice, it's always been faster. And the reason why is because doing a few equality checks on like a dependency, on whatever's in my dependency array, is super fast. And they're like, but React's render is also fast. I'm like, yes, it is. But it's still like React create element calls, a ton of them, to create this like large object tree structure. And then to diff the nodes, i.e. equality checks, way more equality checks. And then they talk about like, the memory consumption of that, and I'm like, okay, but like because of the way React works, it's kind of already doing that to begin with. It's, I don't know, I never got it. I definitely concede there might be some like, you know, very fast updating component that constantly has new data. Like, I don't know, I guess if you're making some visualization for like live day traders or something, It's a thing, but I never accepted the argument that you shouldn't memo. I was like, memo all the things and then don't when it doesn't make sense. And one of the big reasons why is if you do the opposite and you don't memorize everything, and you come across a case where React's render isn't fast enough, and you try everything else, you make sure you're doing everything right and idiomatically, and you're lifting state up, and you're lifting the components, the children up as far as you can, and blah, 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 and still not fast enough. You need to memorize a thing. Often there's not now a ton of stuff that you're going to have to memorize as a result, because
the whole tree.
Yeah, and that's a lot of work. Whereas if everything was memoized and you need to not memorize something, it's very easy to undo that.
So my take on that is that, so first and foremost, so the downside that I do see is memory, as you mentioned, but I honestly think in 2023. Computational resources is much more important than memory usage. If you can save yourself like computational resources. And the other thing as well is that I think part of it is that in theory, memoization, you're not feeling bad architectural decisions as bad, like as intensely as you are. Like it's almost like it allows you to band a bad architectural decision. So in that regard, I can see that you shouldn't immediately reach for memoization. Like there's probably better ways to solve that through by means of like
until records and sets are
Yeah.
part of the language.
yes,
Right, like
preach.
so like just because records and sets aren't part of the language,
Tuples.
and
Yes.
sorry, records, tuples, and sets, because sets
It's
will also
already
have
part.
more
Yeah.
identity.
Yeah.
Well, there will be like a stable identity set.
Will they?
Yes.
Oh, that's
yeah.
sweet.
Very exciting. And functions don't have stability for some reason. Functions can have, it's just because they're declared in a different closure. Anyway, so when records and tuples come to the language, like 80% of the use memo stuff will be unnecessary.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Right now, the language doesn't give you referential integrity on those things. And I don't care what your argument is.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the optimizations everywhere are the same, and the use memo thing isn't as much about saving cycles as it is about just giving things that should be easy to give referential integrity some referential integrity.
Yeah.
And it's a requirement of like doing proper work, like writing well-designed, well-engineered React code requires you to have referential integrity for the grand majority of the data flowing through your tree.
React's whole thing, right from day one, has been we decide to re-render or not based on equality, and to make that check quick, we check referential equality, right? Like that's I think internally they use object-is, that's the algorithm, but which you can read about on MDN. But that's what they use, and that's been like from day one. So, and the thing about memoizing all the things is it actually, like, it sounds like a schlep, but it removes the cognitive load. Now it's something you don't need to think about. Like, premature optimization is something that, like, you're thinking about before it's necessary, and this is a no-thinking thing, right? Like, it's like, just don't think about it, just do it. Like, there's literally lint rules you can install that remind you about it. And I will agree, it's a schlep and it's boilerplate. But at the same time, the fact that it's a lot easier to unmemorize something than to meaningfully memorize something, again, talking about, it turns out there's a whole, like, the thing you thought you needed to memorize is the tip of the iceberg, actually, right?
I'm gonna throw my hot take for the week. Isn't it so awful that we actually have to do a hard thing here and there to earn $160,000 a year? Oh, shame! Oh, shame! I have to wrap a function in another one.
Yeah. So you're telling me all these full stack 6-week boot camps can then be condensed down to 3 weeks instead, because now they don't need to learn about memoization. No, I get that. And
that number I also just didn't pull out of thin air. That's the median North American.
It is
salary at the moment.
It is like principal engineers earn like, I don't know, 400K base salary, and then
that's not how you say that. You say stacks. They earn stacks.
Right. I've honestly considered moving to the US probably about once a year, and then I look at the political situation and I'm like, okay, do I need
has left the call. US politics have been mentioned. It's not really just left the call.
Well, I mean, his slides.
Is enough of the new official doc to tackle React properly according with your experience asked by Giandomenica. I think so. The beta,
Yeah.
they're not beta React docs anymore. They are not beta
Yep.
docs. They are now official docs, and I actually have a contribution pending to them when I find time to not write like an idiot.
Yeah, no, I think the new docs are great. I think they're a good place to start. They definitely explain a lot of pitfalls. They've got little exercises that help you understand the concepts correctly. They're really, really good. I was sending people to those docs while they were in beta for a long time already, because they were really, really good.
And they're only getting better. And the team really are doing a lot of work. Shout out to them. Let's shout out to individual contributors, because there
Well,
are.
Dan did a lot of work on it, and then I think
Well,
didn't he have a lot of help
Dan's
from
gone. Dan doesn't exist anymore.
But I actually
Dan's
wanted
taking a
to
well-deserved break.
But I also wanted to bring that up in the conversation about kind of Vercel and Next and all of that. It's actually going to be interesting to see how much Dan still remains involved. So yeah, I think that's going to also be quite a significant indication. Sorry.
Well, a lot of his work really towards the end was kind of the community outreach focused side of things. Because if you go, there was a period where any React issue, Dan was involved in, and not just involved as in he said, thanks for posting, as in long considered, well thought out responses. It was a work. So, and I think the emotional toll of that is part of the reason why he's having a well-deserved break. Okay.
Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah.
One release I would like to talk about is Yarn. Yarn release version 4.
Let's maybe end with that, and let's maybe break new grounds and actually end on time.
And there's so much other stuff that we'll rattle off quickly at the end. Other things that were released that we don't have time to talk about. So I'm gonna go with myself. I'm a Yarn fanboy. I like Yarn. I think Yarn is great. And it's funny because the reason people got into Yarn is because it was faster than NPM, right? But a lot faster than NPM. And it turns out actually that at the time, the reason it was faster is because NPM had a bug that made it very slow, which nobody noticed until Yarn came along. Yarn's reason for being wasn't to be a fast bundler. Like performance is not explicitly one of the things they're terribly concerned about. Obviously, they don't want it to be slow, but
they want to be direct, right?
It's not their top priority to be the fastest bundler. That's not their top priority. They are still pretty fast. They're ever so slightly slower than PNPM right now. But what I like about Yarn is, by the way, their actual goal is to be a package manager, not just for JavaScript. They have support for Composer in the PHP ecosystem.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I just know about. I haven't used that.
I also just want to add. So you mentioned, the main reason why I back in the day used Yarn was for workspaces. Actually, I didn't really care about the speech.
That was the thing they initially came out for. But the thing is, Yarn started at Facebook. It was never officially a Facebook-owned project. That was something else that was a bit of a misconception. In any case, the big reason why I like Yarn is because of its focused on correctness, right? So I'm not sure how many of you have ever had a problem. So the way Node's resolution algorithm works is it basically just looks up the file tree for the first occurrence of a thing that satisfies the semver range. And the way that NPM installs stuff, sometimes you can have a version of a transitive dependency change because you installed or upgraded something else. And that can introduce bugs because now a version, because it changed a version of that transitive dependency for all of your other dependencies that also have that in its semver range. And if that introduces a bug or an incompatibility or anything else that changes, it's called hoisting. And if you use Yarn with its plug and play algorithm, which is what they recommend, then nothing is ever hoisted that way. It's like you're using that exact kind of like version. That version is still shared if there are like if it like satisfies semver, but not in a way that you'll accidentally end up loading the wrong version of a thing. And that's what I really like Yarn for. The next thing is reproducibility. So they have this concept of zero installs where you can have a cache that's local to your project. It basically what happens is it downloads all your dependencies as zip files. And you can commit those to your repo, which means that on CI runs, it doesn't matter if npm is down or not. On deploys, it doesn't matter if npm is down or not. When you switch branches, if you're using zero installs and pnpm, when you switch branches, you don't have to remember to run yarn install unless one of your dependencies has like a build step. And that dependency changed. So all of these things you don't have to remember, and like I find those features are like really, really pretty cool. The one thing that sucks about PnP is because there's no node modules folder, in order to access binaries and part of the code, your IDE setup has to know about that. VS Code and Vim are relatively well supported. With everything else, you're kind of on your own. You can do it.
There's MasterCard for that.
There's?
For everything else, there's MasterCard.
All right. Having said that, it can.
What is that about dad jokes?
It's not like you can't use a node modules folder. They have this thing called the node linker, which is a feature that you can enable. They have this thing called PnP resolution, which is what PnPM does. So not PnP resolution, the PnPM way of doing things, which you can also do. But then, so in other words, if you like the way they do module resolution, these other bundlers, you can still do that for Yarn. But on top of that, with Yarn, you can patch a package and make it part of your thing. So if there's like something that needs a patch, you can go and you can go Yarn patch. What it'll do is it'll check out that dependency somewhere on the file system, fix what you need to fix, and then like there's like a Yarn patch up or a second command where it goes and like packages that back up. But now when your teammates install it, they have your patch for that package. There's like, they've got plugins, right? There's the TypeScript plugin where if I install a package, if I go Yarn install some package, and that package doesn't ship with types, but there are types on definitely typed, Yarn will automatically just add that and add it to the dev.
Interesting, really.
It's like,
it's
amazing. People think it's crap. Yarn. It's not. It's such a good package manager.
I don't have much constructive to add to the conversation other than like correctness is a cool virtue, and I prefer PnPM.
So we're actually split three ways. I actually prefer just vanilla npm. Well, not prefer, but like.
Is that because it comes installed with your operating system now?
Well, exactly. So, but like, obviously, do I think it's a good idea that a package manager is bundled into Node? No, it's an absolutely terrible idea, and it should never have happened. Okay?
No. They fixed that. They fixed that by packaging all of them now. Have you looked at CorePack? So CorePack is now bundled with Node, and when you install Node, it also installs CorePack, and you can then go CorePack enable. And what CorePack enable does is it creates little stub executables for npm, pnpm, and Yarn. And then in your package JSON, you get to say like, I don't know, package manager version or something along those lines of a specific package manager and a version. And then what it'll do is like on the fly, go and download that version and use that in that project. So they fixed it by just packaging all of them.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
great fun.
I guess I might actually change my mind about this, but like for now, like as someone like that kind of works with a lot of students, works with a lot of juniors and whatever, to me the cost is always just like having extra moving, like is the benefit worth all the extra moving pieces? But it sounds like that might actually change now going forward. But for me, like the fact, like as mentioned, it shouldn't have been packaged into npm. I don't even think packaging all of them is maybe even a good
So,
solution.
like crates shouldn't go into Rust, and Mix shouldn't go into Elixir.
But it is what it is. So given that is the decision that was made, you might as well just benefit from the fact that you don't need to install something extra.
I think the problem with Node was there were actually a bunch of competing package managers out there. And when they decided to bundle npm, it wasn't yet clear that it was kind of the one that would win out. So I think a language should probably nowadays have a good story around package management, and that should be fine. But the problem with npm is that it became blessed prematurely.
So it looks like
It was the least.
we
It
are
was the
going
least
to make
worst.
time again.
Oh no, we're over time. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, a
Good
few
on
other
us.
things happened. Storybook 7.5 was
Keep the
released.
tradition
Lit
strong.
has a pre-release. Astro 3.2 is released. They've got view transition support.
Is we really need to talk about Astro 3. We've been kicking this can down the road now for like...
Next
it's been
14 was released,
Like
which has
everyone
got
else.
support for server actions. And MDX3
Yeah.
was released. Mock Service Worker 2 was released. So
Yeah.
much stuff.
Okay, I am making a commitment right now. You can hold me to this. The
Next time we talk about
JavaScript-
Astro.
I'm going to talk about Astro, and I'm going to specifically talk about view transitions because, like, view transitions are amazing. I actually submitted a DevConf talk about view transitions. So, yeah, it's a really fascinating.
Scott really wants to talk about this.
Yes. Hey, I need to start working on my talk, guys.
You shouldn't have told me that. You shouldn't have told me that, Skulk.
Anyone who wants to submit CFPs for DevConf, the deadline is 12 o'clock tonight.
Yeah, it's literally like a couple of hours. Did you also submit a talk about view transitions, Zandor?
No. I'm a reviewer, which means if I get like a talk about view transitions, I've got to now like recuse myself because I know you.
That makes two of. Can I tell you something?
everyone.
Can I tell you something? That makes two of us because I'm also a reviewer.
Yeah.
I definitely do need to get going, unfortunately.
All right.
Have a wonderful festive season for all our viewers. And
Yes.
Zandor, after you, Skulk, you're going to be talking about view transitions. Cheers.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cool. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye.